Hello everyone and welcome to our lecture 6 and we'll continue our discussion on supply chain management today. And in the last lecture, if you recall, we discussed about a CFT approach, the cross-functioning team approach, and a sequential approach. We made some comparisons and we basically discussed the pros and cons of each approach. And our conclusion is that the CFT approach works best under uncertainties and the sequential approach definitely works in a more cost-effective and stable way in a situation with less uncertainties. And today we're going to be discussing more practical aspect of supply chain management. So we first of all start with our section 1, that is strategic dimensions of supply chain management. So if you recall from us earlier as our lecture 1 and 2, we actually discussed participants are supply chain. So the participants are fairly simple, they're SMD and C. So the asset supplier, which is the first participant in our supply chain, it is our vendor. So it provides us with our raw materials that we need, and then it goes to the stage of a manufacturer. The manufacturer is in charge of the operation of our product or services. So it's basically creates a product for us, creates the goods for us, and then it is up to the stage of the distributor, which may be a logistic company or so, and it is to be distributed to different different distribution channels. Maybe it's directly transported to the house of the customers. Maybe it has to go through a retail shops. It goes through a wholesaler, so and so. Maybe it goes to a delivery companies for the products to be delivered to the customers through e-commerce. And there are many ways. And we mentioned before, SMD are basically classified under the efficiency-driven value requirements. So in these stages, our goal is to basically ensure high efficiency involved, which is how we can minimize our time, minimize our cost, to try and produce our products as efficient and effective as possible, ensuring the quality, meeting the standards, and with conformity. And in the responsiveness driven state, our goal is to basically to be able to reduce the lead time and to be able to satisfy our customer with the utility, with the quality of our product. So it can be a bit contradictory to ensure both efficiency and responsiveness, because responsiveness may also relate to flexibility, which is how tangible is your product to uncertainties in the market. So our goal objective for every company is basically to maximize both efficiency driven and responsiveness driven value at the same time. How? By designing our supply chain effectively. So in this lecture, in lecture 6, our main focus points basically on how to ensure a effective supply chain. So I believe this lecture is kind of a more practical. And we'll now firstly discuss the designing factors of structural and infrastructural dimensions. So first of all, the structural dimensions. The structural dimension is basically involved with the physical products and materials of our company. So for example, it involves the configuration of different technologies, different systems, the connection as well of a whole, maybe our machineries, connection of our computational system, our computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing systems, and then our inventory as well, how much inventory should we hold. It actually connected to our profits and revenues, because there are a lot of inventory strategies, and we'll get to that later. Because different inventory strategy actually creates different effects for the company. Some companies success with different strategies, but definitely we will be discussing the pros and cons of each strategy, so you understand what to employ. Because inventory may be a large percentage, it may be a large percentage of a company's assets, because while you purchase too much inventory, it is basically you are putting your cash and transferring cash into inventory. And if you can sell all this inventory within a time and it doesn't perish or get broken, then definitely you are basically earning money and earning profits. But in many cases, people hold inventories but they're unable to be sold, and they maybe get perished, or maybe for example, even not only for the food, not only for the meat or veggies, but even for computers. After a long time, it's not going to function well. A new generation of a SIM card of the CPU have to come out. Then definitely you're wasting huge cost, and sometimes overholding inventories and not able to sell them to the public within the within the range of time. Maybe company can easily die out from the market from its competitors. And then we also have logistics involved as part of a structural dimension, because logistics is also an important part, because it is a physical, basically the transportation of our products, either to our distributors, maybe to the wholesaler, to the retail shops, to the delivery companies, and to the house of the customers, or even transporting our products through our manufacturer to our maybe to our headquarters or something like that in different countries, especially for our multinational corporations. It is really important to be able to transport products around the world. So logistics is definitely a really important physical product, I will say a physical element involved. So it is also classified under the structural dimension. Structural dimension involves investment in physical facilities such as materials and systems. And if we give an analogy, which is like a metaphor, we can say the structural dimension elements are basically the computer hardware, because they are basically the physical framework of our company. And then the infrastructural dimension in the analogy is basically the computer software, because it involves all these intangible, invisible, which means factors that you cannot see directly. It is not as a physical good or physical element, and it is quite implicit, while the structural dimension is explicit. So explicit basically means it is clearly shown and you can see it directly, while implicit means it is important but you cannot grasp it directly from your eyes. And these factors include, I would say, those capabilities, important capabilities within a company, such as communication, information, collaboration, and such as some motivations or incentive schemes. So these are really important because they ensure whether a company can perform well and be coordinated well inside. So it is basically computer software, and actually, if you think more deeply, they're of equal importance. Actually, you may think that structural dimension is more important because you're actually putting your cost to buy this inventory or logistics, and the implicit factors are more like an intangible one involving no cost. But I would say it is basically the same as the analogy. A computer software is not going to work with a hardware. You cannot even use and enjoy Facebook, Instagram, or your games without a hardware. But then the hardware is nothing when there's no software, because then it is not going to be, it is if you see the popular phones in the market, iPhone, Samsung, they basically have all this smart software in their phones as well. So this is a pretty good analogy, and this is what I want to say, because in a company, although maybe physical facilities require direct purchases, but infrastructure dimension is of equal importance, because if there's bad communication, there's bad collaboration, there's no strategic thinking, there's no high level management, even if you put the cost into buying these physical facilities, materials, and systems, your company may not succeed and will be likely to die out in the market in a short amount of time. So this is basically about the structural dimension and the infrastructural dimension. Now, what about the designing factors? Now we want to classify configuration, connection, inventory, and logistics into operational and strategic. So for configuration, it's basically about location in supply chain management. It is basically about configuration is pretty much about where are you going to place your manufacturing, where are you going to sell to. It is highly strategic. This is because iPhone has to decide whether it is going to sell to this particular market or not before it's making this decision. First of all, I want to give you some definitions, which you can see below. So strategic basically refers to over a long time horizon, or I would say strategic are more risky, risky actions to be taken, because when it is a strategic element, you're actually inputting and implementing of a subjective thinking, because since it's a strategic, there's no right or wrong answer at first. Maybe there's right or wrong answer after you success or fail, but before you actually are not sure whether your strategy will work or not. So basically it can be a little bit risky, it is a little bit like a bad. Well, operational, on the other hand, is more like short-term, day-to-day basis activities, and they are actually less risky. It can be highly risky for inventory as well, and it can be risky for logistics, but it is more of a short-term, day-to-day basis decisions to be made. For example, for configuration, it's definitely a long-term kind of a decision. Whether Apple is going to sell its products to Europe, whether it is going to sell its products to Southeast Asia, whether it is going to enter the Chinese market, these are really important strategic decisions that involve a lot of planning, research, and experimentations and simulations before they make this decision. And so I would say it is 100% strategic. Because it is over long term, so you can see from the definition below. And for connection, I would say it is connection basically refers to the production and matching of the product, and I would say it is 80% strategic, because it's more on the strategic side that you have to decide where you're going to produce a product, and that is likely to be a long-term decision, because where you're going to produce a product, which is our aim, your participant, it is directly then linked to your DNC and also linked to us. And I mentioned in our lecture 1, if you can recall a little bit, I talked to you guys that manufacturer, which is M participant, is actually a focal company. I will not say determinably it is the most important company inside the supply chain management, but it is quite important. I would say it is. That's why I address it as a focal company, and it is 80% strategic because where you want to put your production is directly involved in your cost, directly involved in your where's your supplier, where's your distributor. So once you make the whole connection, you actually it's really unlikely to change. But it has certain elements in operational point of view, because sometimes production can be a short-term basis, sometimes production can be easily chosen. For example, if you are a company that is selling in the Chinese market, for example in Beijing, if you just sell in Beijing and you are comparing where to produce, it is only in the city. Your products are not to be sold in other countries or other cities in China. It may be a bit easy to determine where you're going to put your production. You get what I mean? For example, Beijing has a lot of districts, but although it can be a little bit strategic in terms of which district is cheaper, which one is more cost effective, which one is closer to the supplier or the distributor or the customers, but still it may be much more easier if you can narrow down your requirement or your businesses into something like a city, or even if it's a smaller business when it is only like a town or like a district, you'll be kind of a more of operational point of view, I would say. Okay. And on the inventory side, although I mentioned just now, inventory can be a highly risky. Inventory just a product, but inventory management can be a highly risky activity because it really depends which strategy you adopt, and what will be the outcome of your product in the market really will affect your cost, will affect your revenues and profits. Because sometimes if you hold too much inventory, you can incur high cost and your company might die out because you don't have any assets anymore, because you already converted all your cash into buying, or I would say inventory a pretty much percentage of your cash you buy a lot. Then if it's already about 60 to 7% of your cash or your revenues are put into investing in manufacturing and holding new inventories, and if your inventories are not successfully sold in the market, then you are going to incur very high cost inside. So that is can be a bit risky, but I would say it is more operational, because inventories is also a short-term day-to-day basis. So I don't want to confuse you guys so much. Although the operational strategic this proportion, this distribution is quite important, but although the inventory and logistics are more inclined, or logistics fully inclined to the operational side and not on the strategic side, it is also involved a lot of strategies making. That doesn't mean operational, doesn't mean that you can just make decisions and you'll be accurate, you'll confirm be the best way, because in logistics and inventory, you have a lot of choices to make. And you can success or fail depending on management in your logistics and management inventory. For example, in logistics, where sometimes you can incur really high cost if you don't design your route very well, because your route, which is how you're going to transport products to the homes of your customers, can be pricey or not, or cheap depending on your design, and can be effective or not depending on your design as well. And it can also directly affect customer loyalty, because in many cases, if you are deliver your product slower to the customers, you are actually breaking the reputation of your own company. So I want to explain only to this stage on this operational and strategic proportion distribution, because I don't think it is the best way to express whether it's operational or strategic. But I would say in the theoretical context, logistics is actually 100% operational, because it is really short-term basis, and it can be a little bit different as time you go. So it's not some decision to be made over a long time horizon. So that is about this. And more on this now we're actually looking at a diagram of SMDC, which is actually a diagram involving a lot of countries, and we are trying to figure out a way to design a supply chain. So each kind of a white spot here is a country, and arrow is a connection, and you can definitely input some symbols to represent transportation, logistical options, and then you have these locations, and you can decide where you want to hold inventory. So now, because I'm not able to annotate here, I previously made something of a supply chain, which I will go through with you. So in Korea, for example, there can be actually an internal Korea kind of a supply chain. So we start in maybe a kind of a Korean city that holds our inventory. Let's say it's Jeju Island, or let's say it's Incheon, and then we transport, or let's say I would say it is more of a third tier city in Korea because we got there's a cheaper production there. So if we choose Jeju, let's say we choose Jeju or Andong or Ansan to produce our product, you can research about later. These cities are not as developed as Seoul and Incheon and Busan. And then after that, we go to the second stage. The second stage, we are still holding our inventories, and maybe it is our manufacturer right here in this city. Let's say now is maybe Ansan. Ansan is manufacturing, so we start from Andong and we go to Ansan for our manufacturing. Then we go to Busan for our local service provider because Busan is a really developed city. Although we may sell our products into Busan, maybe we have customers in Busan, but Busan will be the place where we do our distribution. So it is much closer to Seoul, and which is where we're aiming to sell our product to the end customers. And so in Busan, we'll apply after our truck, we'll apply different we'll handle products from the manufacturer to our delivery service providers, and then these service providers will use the trucks to transport our products into the capital of South Korea, which is Seoul, South Korea. So our end customers will be enjoying our products there. So this is a really simple internal design, which that all the participants, the suppliers, the manufacturer, the distributor, and the customers are all in Korea, and very likely the customers are Korean as well. This is very common, and it can happen in China as well. Let's say, sorry for the typo in Shanghai. There should be A here, sorry for that. So if we produce our products, first of all, in China, let's say we produce in Zhejiang, in Anhui province, Hunan province, because China is really big, so there are many cities, Shanghai, Beijing, these cities are the developed and expensive cities. But then there are a lot of cities with a cheaper labor compared to these developed first tier cities. So you try to find one that is much closer to Shanghai. So I would say I'm not going to produce my products in Hunan, for example. Maybe you're not sure about that. Hunan is basically in really southern part of China, while Shanghai is also south but it's more far away. So let's say I'll produce my products in Anhui province. So it comes start from Anhui province, and it goes to Shanghai for manufacturing. Sorry for that, but I don't think it's very likely because I would say Shanghai may be too expensive for manufacturing. But let's say if we can find a cheap manufacturer in Shanghai, it is much closer to our distributor, which is not bad as well. So just assume we are now producing our product back in Shanghai, and after our products finish from Shanghai, we're going to be drive to Shanghai again, maybe to a different district where Pudong district, I would say Shanghai is pretty big, and maybe after we arrive in Shanghai will distribute our products, and our end customers are maybe in Shanghai because Shanghai is really a high consumption city with a lot of high net worth consumers, customers. And maybe we'll also transport our products in cities near Shanghai, for example, Nanjing or Wuxi. So we try to transport products to cities near Shanghai and those cities with a high possible earning. So with the potential customers of our targeted group. So in this Korea example, we went from Andong, Jeju, Busan, Seoul, and Anhui, Shanghai, Nanjing. So these are two examples of our internal transportation. They are pretty straightforward. And now we have to get more international. So a Korean supplier is now supplying to China because China is really economically developed. So now it faces a decreased amount of a supplier. So China, the Shanghai manufacturer, can find the cheaper products back in Korea. So maybe Andong, let's say Andong again. The suppliers for Andong is giving the supplying maybe food products or these raw materials back to Shanghai, and in Shanghai we'll complete our manufacturing, and maybe we will complete the route again. We then be distributed to Shanghai, then sold to Shanghai and maybe Nanjing. But there's another way. After we manufacture in Shanghai, we distribute it in Vietnam. This is more of a complicated route here. So we manufacture in Shanghai. We went to Vietnam for our distribution, and Vietnam will transport the product back to South Korea, back to Busan, and Busan will distribute the product to Incheon and Seoul, South Korea, to be sold in these two most developed cities in Korea. So what can you infer from this? So Korea maybe has a cheap supplier in Shanghai, maybe in certain districts, in certain places. Shanghai also has a relatively cheap labor. And it is distributed in Vietnam. Why not continue in China? Because maybe China in Shanghai distribution may be expensive. Vietnam is also an emerging economy and also is an emerging socialist state, and maybe you can find cheaper distribution services in Vietnam because China now is growing too fast. It is getting more market economy. So now in Vietnam, then our customers are in Seoul because in Seoul, South Korea, there are many rich people in certain district like Gangnam district. So we're trying to sell our products back to South. And now our option is not to go back China again because it can be quite costly in terms of transportation cost. So now we go back to Busan, and Busan will do our second state transportation to China. And you may say why we don't just directly transport our products from Vietnam to Korea. I would say it really depends. In this case, maybe it is possible distribution in Korea can be cheaper. So it really depends. Sometimes, of course, in a larger context, in a more theoretical and general point of view, it is always cheaper to produce and to produce. So our SN are basically more cheaper in developing countries, I would say so. But sometimes you also should take account of the distance. If you want to produce in China, like Anhui province or Hunan province or Hubei, which are very cheap labor back there. But if you want to sell these products back to EU, it may be too expensive. But if Vietnam is closer, I'm not sure, but like for example, if Vietnam is closer, why not just produce in Vietnam? Or even if Korea is closer, but Korea is more expensive, but if you deduct or reduce the transportation cost, maybe Busan will be a better option, or I would say Ansan will be a better option to manufacture a product than you going to Anhui or Hubei in China to manufacture a product. And now let's go to the third rule, which we see Thailand. So for the Thailand, if Thailand is our supplier, and then we may sell our products back to Shanghai, then Shanghai will sell it to Vietnam, Vietnam will distribute it to Korea, and they sell to Korea. And there's another way to go. Well, Thailand produces these raw materials, maybe rice. I think you guys know about have eaten rice. If you are more of a rice person, rice is popular from Thailand. Thailand is I think producing more popular rice in Singapore than China. I see a lot of Thai rice in Singapore. I'm not sure whether it is actually the world's first producer, but I would say so. It is ranked one of the top rice producer. So let's say if the rice. So Thailand will basically provide the rice to Shanghai. Shanghai will package the rice. Let's say India will package rice, and the rice will be distributed then sent to Vietnam. Vietnam will distribute the rice and it's sold to China. This is actually a really realistic rule because in China, while I was living in China, I also bought a lot of the Thai rice. Even though China is a really big country with a lot of agriculture activities going on. So in this case, I would pretty much agree this route is pretty much good because first of all, the distances are reduced. Vietnam is quite close to China in certain, especially it depends on where you're going to go. So Vietnam is really close to China's Guangxi province. So I would say the rice will be transported to Guangxi province. It may be sold within Guangxi province, or it can be sold to other provinces in China, or even go to the capital, which is really likely go to Beijing or Shanghai. Also, India is relatively, I would say, cheap manufacturer, maybe much more cheaper than China if we say in the 2020 point of view. So that is a pretty much possible route to go. Now let's go to United Kingdom. Although it's a developed country, but it may also be a supplier. United Kingdom also has its own rich agriculture sector, which needs to make money. If they transport their products to South Korea, and South Korea basically maybe Ansan or Jeju Island will manufacture the product. It may be then sold to the US. Although this may be a bit unrealistic because taking the distances in account, but maybe it is pretty cheap to manufacture in certain places in Korea. If the businesses are able to compare and they find Korea is the best option, maybe it is the optimal choice to manufacture in Korea. And after Korea, it is sold to the United States, and then it's also it is distributed in the United States, and the end customers are enjoying the product from inside the United States. US is actually have 50 states. It is a really large country, so there are many options, many options to transport the product within the country. So maybe it is first, maybe it's sold in many states. I don't know. And the last rule we're going to discuss is first we start in United Kingdom again. It is then manufacturing in Alabama of the United States. Then it is distributed in the United States, which is really likely because then it's quite close. And maybe from Alabama, you transport the product to some states that's near the EU country, for example, France or like Germany, the country that US wants to sell the company wants to sell the product to, and then so they can go to a state like Wyoming, Minnesota, New York, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, something like that, and they'll then ship this product to the European Union countries. So these are just some examples. I want you guys to just have a little bit of understanding of the supply chain design. Although it is not really simple, supply chain design can be hard. You have to take a lot of variables in account, like the cost, the distances, the efficiency in these countries, how well the workers work. Are you able to find a good joint venture or find a collaborator in this country? How well can you manage your inventory in these countries? You should also take account of the time differences, because sometimes when there's time differences, you miss out a lot of information, and you actually will make a bad decisions. When there's a time difference, you won't be able to make a quick and immediate accurate decisions. So this is basically an example I want to show you. Hope you guys find it a bit interesting. I want you guys in your own time also design some routes, maybe suppliers start from Vietnam, Thailand, China, India, or even we can consider, depending on where you're going to sell product, we can consider South America as well. We can say Brazil, Argentina, Chile can be a potential suppliers as well. They are reaching certain resources. And then we can also consider supplier, for example, in Africa. We can Jamaica, South Africa, and Congo, and also developed nations as well, UK, US, they also have their own agriculture. They need to make money by supplying. Don't think that only China or India are the suppliers. And then a distributor, then you can do your own kind of design, or you can also find an example of a supply chain on an existing company like Apple, Samsung, like things like that, Coca-Cola, something like that. Okay. So that is my short discussion with you on the supply chain design. Sorry for it is a bit stark. Sorry. Okay, now we want to discuss about more deeply on our structural dimension. So first of all, our configuration. Configuration is basically the geographic placement of a supply chain functions or activities. So I mentioned just now the configuration is actually a strategic decision. It involves a commitment of resources to a long-term plan. Because once you decide the location, you're going to set up your business right there. You're going to exploit your potential customers right there and sell your product. So configuration is really a long-term commitment. And the factors to consider is, first of all, I mentioned just now, it is a really long-term decision. So you have to ensure that it is an effective way. It is an effective location. You also have to consider certain strategic factors to enhance efficiency and responsiveness. So some strategic factors may include the price and the inventory strategies, transportational logistics strategies as well, to enhance your efficiency and responsiveness. And B is connection. Our matching decisions is also a pretty strategic decision to be made. It is basically about how to connect these per supply chain functions or activities. Where are you going to produce your product? After that, we're going to match the next step. So factors to consider are also efficiency and responsiveness. How can you ensure your production can be fast? Where can you produce your product fast? Where can you find more efficient but as well cheap labor? Where can you make this connection between different systems so you can produce your product and transport your product pretty quick to where you're going to distribute your product and where you're going to sell your product? So that's pretty important. And C is our inventory decisions, which is also essential. Inventory is at every stage of supply chain, as in the raw material, semi-finished, or finished goods. So when you purchase your inventories, when you manufacture your inventories, it is actually long commitment as well. I would say it is a high cost commitment. And the primary purpose of inventory decision is actually to buffer against uncertainty. What does it mean? The goal is to buffer against uncertainty, because when there's companies, when there's a high orders, when there's a sudden orders, the purpose of inventory is to be able to fulfill the orders done by the customers so they can get your product and you can make money. Although holding too much inventory has a lot of issues, I mentioned a few times in this lecture already, and we'll discuss them later in detail. But definitely, the primary purpose is actually to buffer uncertainty. So when you see companies stock up a lot of inventory, first of all, if it's successful, definitely the inventory are to be sold. But actually, the purpose is actually to fulfill the orders done by customers unexpectedly. So when customer suddenly raise your orders, you can supply a product. But definitely, you may question me, and I think it is a really good point, is that how, if there's uncertainty regarding the orders are dropping fast, the orders are dropping drastically, people are not wanting to buy the product, then I would say inventory will be a high cost and the company may experience a lot of failures, and cash flow may run out, definitely. So there's 3 different inventory types. The first inventory type is raw material inventory, which are the intermediate, which are the things we buy from our supplier while we are not inputting them into manufacturing yet. And the second process is inventory. The second type of inventory is a semi-finished products. So the products are basically finished, although it's called semi-finished, the products are actually finished and can be used, but they are not prepared to be shipped to the customers. So maybe they are finished, but they haven't done certain checks. They haven't been planned to be distributed to the distributors, something like that. So it's kind of a semi-finished, still not ready to be shipped to the customers. And the third stage and the third type of inventory is basically the finished products, which are the products ready to be shipped to the customers. So these are the three types of inventories. Okay, so in inventory decision, our forecasting method is basically based on our product lifecycle. Because in a product lifecycle, which you found in marketing, it basically investigates how much demand of this product, how much sales of these products you can incur after the product is published in the market. So in the introduction stage, definitely there's not too much order because you're still developing the popularity of your product. In the growth stage, you maybe have to increase in units of products. In the maturity stage, your amount of products will reach optimal because it is matured, and I would say theoretically on the maturity stage, in the maturity stage, you experience the highest sales possible for this product, and then your decline. So you try to reduce the inventory. Maybe you either studied an extension strategy, which is maybe a new version of a product or some features added to this product for it to be continuous successful, or you might start with a new product while you may be already working on this new product. So you start a brand new product lifecycle focusing on another product. So basically, as time goes, which is your decision horizon, as it goes far away, you have to determine how much you're going to produce, how much inventory should you hold at each stage. If you can forecast it really accurately, that means you actually reduce a lot of cost inside your inventory decision-making process. Because normally in the introduction stage, for example, you should not prepare too much if not popular. In the maturity stage, although maybe there's high demand, but still you have to focus it quite accurately because not all products follow the product lifecycle. Product lifecycle is more of a theoretical book definition. The introduction, growth, maturity, and decline stage are pretty important. I would say you have to keep them in mind, but definitely not all products will fall into the shape of this curve because some products don't even get to maturity. As I mentioned before, not only a few business success in the market. Maybe Apple has a maturity stage, but many products don't even reach maturity stage. Maybe from the beginning it's not popular, and after 1 year it is still not popular, and the boss is losing a lot of money. It is also possible. So definitely you have to keep in mind while you follow the product lifecycle. When you are able to observe the performance of a product in the market, it is definitely easier to control your inventory, and sometimes you basically have to make some predictions. But my advice to whether if you want to start your own small business in the future, better be prepared that you should prepare less inventory, because as a brand new business or a business which hasn't reached any successful stage yet, it is unlikely to see some drastic curve like this, that you have an introduction, that you have a number of units of inventory in the introduction stage, and you are able to generate sales as high, as drastic as this curve goes. So definitely this is my advice to all those who are wanting or aiming to start business in the future. Okay, so you have to focus with the system lifecycle, with the product lifecycle, but always keep in mind with your business situation, because forecasts are not to be done along with this curve. Because the different, depending on the business, depending on the scale of the business, the different number of units and the different time for each stage. So you should be prepared. Maybe you will be experiencing some failures, and you should learn from your failure to know how much inventory should you hold inside your business. Okay, then what is the fundamental roles of inventory? It's also an important inventory decision. So cost, innovation, and problem solving are really important. When you hold a larger inventory, you are actually decreasing the capabilities to solve root problems in your company. Because inventory, first of all, I want to make it less confusing. Let's discuss cost first. It should be a bit. I would say it is pretty straightforward. Because when you increase the number of inventory, you are converting a lot of your cash, a lot of your revenues into purchasing this equipment. So you actually decrease your cost a lot. And it is also for innovation, because when you decrease your amount of inventory, there's always more room for innovation. Although I don't mean that all business should reduce the inventory, because if your product is popular and if you hold 1,000 inventory, it is going to be sold in another day. In tomorrow, you're going to sell all these 1,000 inventories. Go for that. Go for inventory holding. Go for stocking, because you're able to generate revenues. But in a broader sense, holding too much inventory don't work well, because many businesses are not able to sell these products to the market. So then in this way, innovation is definitely an advantage when you hold less inventories, because while you may not satisfy your customers in a high degree, in a high extent, while you hold less inventory, you have more cash in your hand as a manager. You have more opportunities to develop new products since you haven't produced too much, so you can use new products with the cost you still have maintained in your hand, held in your hand. So then you can innovate products based on the uncertainties in the market. You get what I mean? So this is basically linked to flexibility. For example, if in the first month this product is popular, and I produce 10,000 of these products to be sold in the next 3 months, but then the customer taste in maybe July, in August suddenly changed. The customer's taste changed, and they now require a different product with different features that is popular or stylish, or some kind of famous products, famous features in the market right now at the moment. And in this stage, in this point, in this circumstance, you have to, if you have less inventory, you are winning. You can innovate, you can quickly change this product. But if you have a lot of inventories, you already have no cash. You converted your cash to the inventory. So your only way is to sell these inventories. But if the customer's preferences change already, your inventories are not able to be sold, then it is really costly, and your business may die out for the competitors very soon. So that is about innovation. And thirdly, it is about problem solving. So if you hold too much inventory, I mentioned just now, you're actually decreasing your capability to identify and solve the root problems in your business. And you don't have enough money to solve and shape this product. Because if you have, just now I mentioned, not only just now on the innovation side, your products, your inventories are wasted because customers don't want to buy your product. And the problem point of view, if you hold too much inventories and you produce them at a short amount of time, although it can be high efficiency, then the problem is there may be some problems. And if there's some problem, you have no turn back. Especially if you already sell it in the market, you publish it, and launch it in the market, if there's still some problem happening there, you're actually incurring what I mentioned a lot of times, the external cost. And with external cost, you're not only decreasing the cost and reducing the cash flow, and in your company, you're also reducing and damaging your own reputation of the company as well. Because when customers buy a problem product, they don't trust the company anymore, right? So this is about some inventory decisions. So based on this and this, so what you have to understand is you have to carefully examine your company, examine the market, examine the performance of your product in the past to do good forecasting. And now as well, you also examine these factors right now as well to ensure you don't incur mistakes. You're able to be flexible, you're able to innovate and face this market reaction, this reaction from the customers. These changes of preferences, the changes of taste of the customers are definitely crucial for your product. Otherwise, your inventories will be all wasted, right? So then now I'm going to introduce to you the deployment strategy. Or let's take a rest, okay? So we'll start discussing some deployment strategies, which will go through the pull strategy and pull strategy, which are two famous and commonly applied, I would say, fundamental inventory strategy, inventory management. Okay, so we'll end this video here and we'll continue our discussion on part 2 of our lecture 6. Okay, see you in the next video.